Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today is something called an ellipse. On your notes, what an ellipse looks like, it's just pretty much just looks like a stretched out circle. Now, what I do is I draw two ellipses here, then let's say another one here. So what this is called the longest part of the ellipse is called your vertice. Boop, boop. And this would be called your covertice. So this is your vertice, and this is your covertice. In this situation, your vertice is along your x-axis, and your covertice is along your y-axis. And it's opposite for this. Your covertice is your x, your vertice is your y-axis. So what ellipses are, when you graph them, they have a center, and then they're stretched out this way, or they're stretched out this way. Okay, so it's kind of like a circle, but with vertical and horizontal stretches. So the equation of an ellipse, remember this equation of the circle, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals, remember how it said your radius squared here for a circle, and then your center of your circle was h and k. Okay, well, this is the center, and that's what it says in your notes. Now, the way an ellipse works is it's always equal to 1, which is how it works. It's always equal to 1. But you divide this by something called a squared, which is on your notes, and this is divided by b squared. Now, if you square root this number, since it's under the x, your x goes left and right, which is your horizontal stretch. And if you square root this, your b is your vertical stretch. So this number right here, when you square root, it tells you how many units you stretch to the right and left from the center. This number tells you how many units you stretch it up and down. The longest stretch is called your vertice. The shortest stretch is called your covertice. So look at the first example question that I give you. I give you an example question of x squared plus y squared equals 1. This is divided by 9. This is divided by 16. Now the way you graph it is this. Think of it like this. Cover this up and just find the center of the circle. So if you had this x squared plus y squared, you would know your center is in the origin. Now square root this number, and this tells you your horizontal stretch. So the square root of 9 is 3. 1, 2, 3 spaces to the left, and 3 spaces, well, this is to the left, and 3 spaces to the right. Square root this number, which is 4. This tells you your vertical stretch. 4 spaces up, 4 spaces down. Now this is going to look almost like a circle because these are very close to each other. Now, what if you had, let's say this was equal to 100. You would square root 100 to get 10. This would mean this would be a stretch of 10 units to the right, which would be over here, 10 units to the left, which would be over here. Now, you're going to see, looks like a football, whatever. There is your ellipse. This tells you your horizontal stretch after you square root it. This tells you your vertical stretch after you square root it. This is called a major radius. This is called a minor radius. But for the sake of this lesson, I think the book and the way state standards want me to teach you, your major radius is called your vertice. And your minor radius is called your covertice. Okay, so I don't like this black marker. This black marker sucks because it just leaves streaks everywhere. I'm not going to use this anymore. Oh, this is horrible. Throw this away. Oh, bummer. Let's erase this a little better. Okay, so in the notes, I want to change the very first example question to this. I just think this one works out a lot more simple for the sake of explaining how this is done. So instead of the 9x squared plus 16y squared plus 54x minus 32y, instead of that one, I want to do an example question just like this, going step by step for completing the square for an ellipse. So the very first thing is factor out the numbers in front of your x squared and y squared. But before we do that, I'm going to line all of these up. Remember when you were doing this with the circle, you lined the x's up. So I'm going to line this and this up, minus 32x. I'm going to line my y's up, y squared minus 14y. And now I'm going to subtract 49 to move this over here. Okay, see how there's a number in front of your x squared? What you have to do is you have to factor out that number. That's the very first step. Factor out the numbers in front of both the x squared and the y squared. So I'm going to factor out a 4 to give me x squared minus 8x. So technically you don't have to factor out anything here, but since I already factored out a number just to keep it the same, I'm going to factor out that 1, and I still get the same thing. Y squared minus 14y equals negative 49. Now this is the weird part. You remember completing a square? Take half of negative 8, which is negative 4, squared, which is 16, and normally you would add it to this side and add it to this side. Well, on the notes I say multiply it by what you factored out and then add that. 16 times 4 is 64. You have to multiply it and then add it over here. Now we have x squared minus 8x plus 16. Now I can factor this. This becomes x minus 4 squared. But I have to use that 4 that I factored out. Okay, same concept with this. Half of negative 14 is negative 7. Squared is positive 49. Multiplied by 1 gives me positive 49. Now I have y squared minus 14y plus 49 equals, and then I can factor this to get y minus 7 squared. I can put that positive 1 here, but I don't need to. Equals, okay, now 49 and a negative 49 cancel out to give me 64. All right, here is where I am at so far. So if I lost you in anywhere, rewind this to make sure you understand how I got right here. That's a great thing about recorded videos. You can just go ahead and rewind it to see where you might have gotten lost, and then come back. So if you did that, everybody should be right here, right now, understanding. Maybe some of you guys had to rewind it and redo it again, which is totally fine. Okay, so here I am. I factored. My very last step is divide this side by whatever this number is, 64. Divide this by 64. Divide this by 64. Now watch what happens. (64) divides by 4 16 times. X minus 4 squared over 16, and plus, technically there's a 1 in front, y minus 7 squared over 64 equals 64 divides by 64 once. Once it's in this form and it equals 1, it's called an equation of an ellipse. And then what you can do is you can graph it. So my center is 4 and 7. So if I were to graph this, I'm just going to kind of guesstimate +4, +7 is going to be up here. This is going to be my more stretched out side. So this is going to be my covertice. This is going to be my vertice because it's a bigger number. This is going to be my covertice. How do I figure out my horizontal stretch? Square root this. So let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and square root this to get 8. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here are my points. And then when you graph it, all I care about is understanding your covertices and your vertices. There's your graph. Okay, let's see how you guys do with the second one. The second one is, go ahead and pause this video, see if you can do it in your notes. Okay, you should have paused it, and let's see how you did. I'm going to group my x's together. 4x squared minus 24x. I'm going to group my y's together. Y squared plus 2y, and then I'm going to move that 33 to the other side. Factor out a 4 from both of these to get x squared minus 6x. Factor out, well, you don't really factor out anything, but I'm just going to put a +1 for the sake of doing this process. Y squared plus 2y. If this wasn't a 1, if this was like a 2 in front of this, you'd factor out the 2 and put the 2 here. But it's not. Okay. Now, complete the square, multiply it by this number, put it here. Complete the square, multiply it by this number, put it here. Half of -6 is -3 squared, which is +9 times 4 is +36. Once again, half of -6 is -3 squared, which is 9. That's called completing the square. But just for the sake of ellipses, you're going to multiply it by 4, put it here. Half of 2 is 1 squared, which is 1. Multiply it by this number, put it here. Factor this now. That's the next step. Factor this. Add these. So this is going to give -33. +36 is going to give me +3. +1 is going to give me 4. Divide everything by 4. Divide this by 4. Divide this by 4. And then simplify, then you're done. Because this equals 1, and that's why we do that. So 4 divides by 4 to get x minus 3 squared plus y plus 1 squared over 4 equals 1. Think of it like this. X minus 3 squared is the same as over 1. So if I were to graph this, I would have a center of +3 and -1. My covertice is going to be the smaller, is to the left one and to the right one, because I square root this. And I square root this, my vertice is going to be up 1, 2, and down 1, 2. There it is. That's what yours should look like. Okay. That was a pretty simple explanation of ellipses.